And you're looking live, going in a circle around Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida as we await the launch of NASA and SpaceX's Crew-10. Hey, it's March 14th, Pi Day, and we are ready to fly away.
I feel fine. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Rocket Tranquility, we copy you on the ground. New possibilities are opening up for scientific cooperation between countries. 1-0-0. Liftoff. American return to space as Discovery clears the tower. Discovery, go and throttle up. Discovery, roger, go for deploy. Everybody in the shuttle program, the crew is go for launch. Roger, nice to be in orbit. We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
Good afternoon and welcome to America's Spaceport here in Florida. This is a live look at Launch Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center where Crew-10 is in the process of suiting up for their mission. The second attempt, today's T0 is 7:03 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's when a Dragon spacecraft sitting on top of a SpaceX Falcon rocket will launch them to the International Space Station. But as you can see now live on your screen, Crew-10 is getting suited up, ready to go, to continue their regular crewed flights from U.S. soil to station as part of NASA's Commercial Crew program. Hello and good afternoon. I'm NASA's Daryl Nail, and this is the official launch broadcast of Crew-10. And with me again on this second launch attempt to help commentate to what's happening this morning is NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. It is so good to have you back.
Thank you, Daryl. It's a lot of fun. This is a nice second go after our dry run dress rehearsal the other day. So we're all excited to get this rocket off the ground today.
Crew-10 got practice, we got practice, the production team got practice, and we're going to be even better than we were before, right?
Absolutely.
Well, the mission today, we are flying NASA astronaut Commander Anne McClain, NASA astronaut pilot Nicole Ayers, JAXA astronaut mission specialist Takuya Onishi, and Roscosmos cosmonaut mission specialist Kirill Peskov. Today, the crew's ride to space is the Dragon Endurance spacecraft, its fourth flight to space, and all four previous, well, including this one, will have carried crews for NASA and one of your favorite spacecrafts, right?
Yes, Endurance is one of my favorite Dragon names, and this is because of the affiliation with Shackleton's Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition. So Endurance was the ship that Ernst Shackleton used in that spectacular voyage. I love reliving these accounts of these early Antarctic explorers. Talk about some brave individuals. Endurance actually was trapped in the pack ice in the Weddell Sea, somewhere where I've actually done research. And that was in 1915. So a nice nod to those incredible explorers.
Indeed. Endurance is a very fitting name for that ship and for the one that is flying today. As I mentioned, today is the second launch attempt for Crew-10. On Wednesday, a little background, NASA and SpaceX stood down from the first attempt after teams discovered a suspected pocket of air trapped inside the ground support hydraulic system used for the clamp arm that you can see there on your screen. It's at the very top of the rocket, holds it to the transporter erector. Yesterday, ground support teams successfully flushed that hydraulic system, and now it's ready to go for today's launch. And so astronauts took a little bit of a break while they did that procedure.
Yeah, we were talking on the broadcast the other day, kind of wondering what they would do with this extra day off, and I was hoping they would have some good time for some R&R. You know, they were supposed to be in space, so essentially they'd done everything they needed to do. So they took a nice, I think they had a nice day relaxing and really accomplishing just that without that task list over their heads of all those last minute things you're trying to do before you go to space, hand over your phone, your email, and all of that. I remember that feeling well. So I think they had a good chance to relax yesterday.
We hope so indeed, because it's needed. It's a long day getting to space, and they have a very long day ahead of them and a long trip to the ISS. So over the next 4.5 hours, we will walk you through this detailed pre-launch operation and show you all the action live as it's happening from the suit-up room through liftoff. But first, let's get some quick background on our wonderful co-host, Jessica Meir. In 2019, if you didn't know, she went on a spacewalk, and it was historic. It was the 221st spacewalk for Space Station Assembly, and the first to be conducted entirely by women. Jessica Meir partnered with fellow astronaut Christina Cook to replace a battery-charged discharge unit. 2 years later, Jessica took on the role of astronaut support person for Crew-2, and there she is in jumpsuit number 38. She was responsible for helping the crew with anything they needed, including these documenting photos. She went all the way to the launch tower, in fact, as you see her there, as the astronauts went into their spacecraft. Meir has served as the assistant to the chief astronaut for the Commercial Crew program, but then also more recently, she rehearsed with the Artemis II crew, as you can see here, during an exercise at Kennedy simulating the crew's preparations on launch day for their mission to the moon. You had served at that time as the chief astronaut for the Human Landing System, the program that's facilitating the build of a lunar lander to return humans to the surface of the moon, and having a good time there with the commander of that mission.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about this job, Daryl, is that we are always doing different things, ranging from helping our buddies that are about to fly to the moon to conducting our own missions. And it's such an exciting time to be an astronaut right now. I mean, as you can see, we have multiple programs. We're continuing on with this International Space Station program, continuous presence up there now for 25 years, getting ready to launch our first astronauts to the moon next year. So it is a great time where we have the opportunity to ride on many different vehicles. There's a view of Anne McLean. She is in her SpaceX suit. You can see the chair she's in. That's identical to the seats that they have in the SpaceX Dragon capsule. And they are probably getting ready now to conduct their leak checks. So we do this in all vehicles that we fly in, where we buckle into our seats, we get all hooked up like we would in the vehicle, and we pressurize the suits to make sure that they have good pressure integrity. So you can see Takonishi there. Looks like his visor's already down. He's possibly already inflating, if not already up to full pressure there. So we're testing out all of these suits to make sure they have good integrity before we get in the vehicle.
And let's talk a little bit about, there you see, that's fully pressurized, what the astronauts did in the time between we first attempted this liftoff on Wednesday to today's attempt. And you can see there, I hear that this beach house here at the Kennedy Space Center was part of the plan.
Yeah, that is a beautiful view of the beach house. I've been fortunate enough to have been there a few times.
We would like you to participate in the show again today. And if you want to do so, just ask your question over the next 4.5 hours, and you can get it in on X, Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. Send your question with the hashtag AskNASA. And we look forward to looking at all those questions and funneling them in to Jessica Meir, who has a rich experience in spaceflight, along with her current training as an astronaut. Okay, time now for the traditional card game. It's a tradition to try and get rid of any bad luck. Yesterday, they played what appeared to me to look like high-low, just a simple card game dealt out to the astronauts, and the chief astronaut, Joe Acaba, on the left, plays it with the crew.
Yeah, I believe it was high card that they played last time. I haven't heard that they were going to change the game, but we're never quite sure because they do change it for different crews. And the history here, there are a few different versions of it, but the one that I think is probably most correct is that they play until the commander loses. That way we make sure that this crew gets all their bad luck out of the way. You can see Joe Acaba is dealing out the cards here to the crew. There's another version that the commander's supposed to win, I guess, to ensure more good luck, but I think it's the first version. And this is nice, just like we were talking about earlier, the traditions that we keep up in the astronaut office to make it a little bit more special, provide that real human touch that we can all connect to, and you can see lots of smiles going on right now. The shuttle astronauts used to play these games all the time, and I'm assuming this tradition maybe goes back even to the Apollo times, but I'm not certain about that one, at least shuttle. Fist bumps all around from the chief.
My guess would be that Anne had a 4 of hearts. And she gave that up, and that's a pretty low card, so
sounds like a loss to me.
It sounds like a loss, yeah. Time to go fly. Anne is a West Point graduate and colonel in the U.S. Army, a highly decorated Master Army aviator. Anne has more than 2,000 flight hours in 20 different aircraft. Anne is also an avid rugby player and former member of the USA Rugby Women's National Team. She currently lives in Houston, Texas, with the rest of the astronauts. The pilot for CREW-10 is NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers. CREW-10 mission will be the first spaceflight for Nicole Ayers, a major in the U.S. Air Force and the first member of NASA's 2021 astronaut class named to a crew. A graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado, Nicole served as an instructor pilot and mission commander in the T-38 and the F-22 Raptor, leading multinational and multi-service missions worldwide. She has more than 1,400 total flight hours, including more than 200 in combat. Nicole has a twin and was born in San Diego, California. To the mission specialist now. This will be the second mission to the space station for JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi. After launching aboard the Soyuz MS-01 mission in 2016 and spending 113 days in space as a flight engineer for expeditions 48 and 49, Onishi received a Bachelor of Engineering degree in Aeronautical and Space Engineering from the University of Tokyo, and soon embarked on a career in aviation with All Nippon Airways in Tokyo. He was selected as an astronaut candidate by JAXA in 2009, and during his stay on the space station, he became the first Japanese astronaut to capture the Cygnus spacecraft in space. When he's not training, Onishi enjoys flying, playing the saxophone, movies, and hiking. And last but certainly not least, this is mission specialist and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Preskov. It is his first trip to space. Before his selection as a cosmonaut in 2018, he was a co-pilot on the Boeing 757 and 767 aircraft for Russian Airlines. Assigned to a test cosmonaut in 2020, he has additional experience in skydiving, zero-gravity training, scuba diving, and wilderness survival. And as you probably noted by me reading their bios there, that all 4, we mentioned this on Wednesday, are certified pilots, military pilots, and pilots in private aviation. And that is impressive for a crew these days.
Yeah, it certainly is that we have all 4 pilots, and I like how you highlighted that. You know, we have 2 military pilots, 2 commercial pilots. It's something that the crew talks a lot about. I think it really helps them in their communications. You know, they all already speak the same language, and a lot of them, each of them have really remarked upon that. It kind of gives them this really synchronous way of communicating, and they're all in lockstep with each other. I think that helps them operate very diseases on Earth with processes that happen in space. And really what happens, space is kind of like an accelerated aging model. So we can study bone cells, we can study muscle cells, we can study our cardiovascular physiology on board and get that data to use not only just for the future of astronauts in space, but also with all of these disease applications that are really direct in many cases back to help improve the lives of patients back down on Earth.
Well, I was excited to go to space until you said it accelerates aging. But I had heard that, and I thought that was interesting.
Temporarily, yeah. It depends on the system, and it depends on the effect. But, for example, one of the experiments that I participated in when I was there it was called
with a full security escort across NASA's Kennedy Space Center, including, they'll get ready to do a drive-by the VAB, as we all know.
You know, I think once we see them get going on the other road here, they're going to get up to like 65 miles per hour or so, which I think they're cruising along and in pretty close proximity of each other.
That's more than the posted speed limit. I just want to let you know.
Special day, absolutely. I know we don't really speed when we drive here at KSC, right? You're too afraid of getting pulled over, but this is a special day for it.
You'll see that guy on your tail.
I'm sure Anne loves the helicopter escort as well. You know, she's a helicopter pilot, so sweet sounds of home. And as they
little kid who set my goals really high and worked really hard and never got bumped off that path. I got my wings in August of 2014, and then I flew F-22s in Alaska, got to do some great flying up there in the mountains. I had a no-notice 6.5-month deployment. From there is when I moved down to Houston to start my job as a NASA astronaut. CREW-10 is a group of pilots who are going to space together to execute science and maintenance. We are about to launch to the International Space Station for a 6-month rotation aboard the orbiting laboratory. We've got a great group of humans who are funny and caring and kind and also wicked smart and capable and efficient. Our major goal is to get to the space station, execute the mission as well as we possibly can, and then come home still funny, kind, and caring about each other. Doing science in space is so important because here on Earth, there's gravity and it's a force that holds things down, and in space we can remove that force. And so we get a glimpse into processes and forces and structures that are too small or too weak and they can't actually flourish here on Earth. Long duration spaceflight is so important for human research to figure out how humans adapt and what happens to your body in microgravity. We get to learn how hardware and plants react in space, and we get to put them in this environment that's pretty harsh. You know, we're outside of the atmosphere, and now we don't have the protection of the atmosphere. What happens to those things, and how do we fix them, and how do we better prepare our people, our hardware, our food, our water systems for that deep space exploration? Throughout all of our training, it's been apparent to me that there is a massive humanity that gets us to space. It takes a village to get us there. The International Space Station wouldn't be
excellent experience for an experienced crew member like Talk to be in charge of the space station, and it's a really nice transfer of controls from Anne McLean being the commander of the vehicle and then handing over to Talk, really giving both of those experienced astronauts a chance for leadership and a commandership.
And how can you not do what they're doing right now? Take in that view. Look out over the railing and just see what a beautiful Florida day it is.
It's an incredible view from up there. Usually a little bit windy, but man, every time I've been up there looking out, you can see the whole coastline, all the other launch pads, the VAB, really the entire Space Center, and it is simply gorgeous.
Maybe that wind is why one of them is standing a little off from the rail.
Yeah. You know, Kirill is actually no stranger to the U.S. either. He actually he was an exchange student in high school in Texas, actually. And there was a great story there. He went to the Johnson Space Center when he was here in high school, and he had some photos, some memorabilia from JSC that he had hanging up in his room when he was a high school student. And his host family in Texas is actually, I think they're still here. I know they were here on Wednesday for the launch. I'm assuming they stayed as well. So really cool connection for him.
That is very cool.
Core on countdown, crew ingress started, on schedule.
And they'll ingress the crew one at a time, being very careful when they step over that seal that surrounds the hatch. Very important to keep the environment inside. And here come our mission specialists down the crew access arm. Takuya Onishi and Kirill Peskov. We can see them on both sides of your screen there, from the outside and the inside. Love that shot.
Yeah, that seal that you were talking about, of course, incredibly important to the integrity of the vehicle. And, you know, there have been instances where even a hair or something can get in the seal and prevent the pressure integrity. But luckily they will do a pressure check to make sure it's all situated before liftoff. They can control for that. And this hatch actually won't be opened again until splashdown and recovery of the crew. So it'll remain closed for their entire mission.
Yeah, that's a great note there, because it's such a big deal when they close that hatch to know that that door is going to be shut for months before it's opened again. While our commander and pilot are getting buckled in, why don't we take a social question? We've been taking them throughout the show. We thank you for submitting them. Chloe Bukeli asks, Jessica, what is your favorite part about the ride up to the International Space Station?
Well, it is an incredibly dynamic ride. You know, as you are launching in any rocket, I launched on the Soyuz rocket and the Soyuz capsule, so different than what we're seeing here today. But all of those launches involve, you know, the accumulation of the G-forces. You especially feel that kind of kick in the pants when the different stages of the rocket detach. But I think my favorite part was, you know, only about 8 minutes, then you're in space. Everything in the capsule starts kind of lifting up, even anything that was on the floor, little bits of dust or anything that was dropped. Your pencil, your arms start lifting up, and everything is weightless. And I remember looking over at my crew. Oleg Skripochka, my commander, he had flown before, so it was familiar for him. But Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri, the very first astronaut from the United Arab Emirates, it was his first flight, just like mine. And I remember looking at him, and his eyes were enormous, and both of us were just thinking, wow, like, this is it. We made it to space.
Wow.
My journey to space was only 6 hours, or to the space station was only 6 hours. Now the Soyuz actually often does what's called a 2-orbit rendezvous, and they're there in only 3 hours. Today, these astronauts will actually be in this capsule for 28.5 hours, so much different, considerably longer than the flight profile if they had launched on Wednesday. And that's just simply orbital mechanics. Depends on the time that you're launching, where the space station is relative to you, and all of these factors. So it could be a very short flight and could be longer. Really, that just kind of showing they'll have quite a bit more time to acclimatize to weightlessness. They'll probably have some really incredible views to look at, whereas, you know, for me, it was all very, very fast. I never even got out of my seat.
How about that?
But they'll actually have a sleep period up there. You know, they'll get out of their seats and suits pretty soon after they're in space. They'll go to bed for a while, and then they'll try to, you know, get some rest and then wake up refreshed for the next day when they will be docking to the space station.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that is something to really, there's something challenging about getting some sleep after you just launched to space in a spacecraft.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I haven't had to do that yet, but I do remember when I got to the space station, you know, you were pretty exhausted. It's a very long day, but your head is just going through so much. Space station are lined up. The angle that you get from those Dragon windows is really great for the Aurora, because you can see them coming from hundreds of miles away and get your cameras ready better than you can from some of the other windows. So, you know, we've seen a lot of incredible photography, especially lately with astronaut Don Pettit on board.
Yeah, he does a great job.
Exceptional photographer. Definitely recommend checking out some of his imagery and that of other astronauts on social media or on the NASA website.
The cupola, does that look straight down?
Just as we have been for decades. We're on a relentless quest for answers, seeking to understand the intricate workings of the human body in space and ensuring future crews stay safe on their daring journeys beyond Earth's orbit.
The human aspect of human space exploration is always going to be very important for decades to come.
And when it comes to technology, we're not waiting around. We're discovering new ways to grow crops in harsh environments and engineering innovations to tackle Earth's greatest challenges.
We have amazing technology that allows us to recycle water and create water for us to drink. It's delicious.
Microgravity isn't just a curiosity, it's a game changer in the fight against diseases back on Earth, paving the way for breakthroughs that benefit us all and enabling new economic opportunities in space.
Welcome Axiom 3 on board the International Space Station.
From our vantage point more than 200 miles above Earth, we are not just spectators. We're gaining unprecedented insights into the world we call home, and we're sharing our findings openly. We're not just achieving results today. We're sparking inspiration in future generations of explorers and embracing the power of global collaboration as we reach for the stars.
What was your favorite experiment on the International Space Station?
Toby, great question. My favorite experiment was the one that I got to eat. It was us growing hatch chili peppers in our plant habitat.
Station Huntsville on 2, we have video in Node 1. Look at those chili peppers.
And as we soar through space at 17,500 miles per hour, each moment is a step closer to unlocking the mysteries of our Earth, our universe, and propelling our pioneering spirit even farther into space. So come along for the ride aboard the International Space Station.
Different people who helped us get where we were and where we currently are on the International Space Station, and to really bring it back to them, to tie it to them as well, to share the mission and remind everyone that this is truly for them and for all of humanity.
And just add a note about Nicole. She said she's taking items from alma maters and the Air Force volleyball team, which you mentioned. Some of them are here today.
Yeah, they are.
She's also taken a bunch of pictures of her friends and family so she can keep them close.
CREW-10. Now, apart from Mission Control, our Falcon 9 team is currently located in the Launch and Landing Control Center at Hangar X. And we are now less than an hour until launch, and they are settling in for final checkouts, propellant loading, and getting ready for launch itself.
Yep, and NASA has its very own set of team members at NASA's Mission Control Center in Houston, Texas, who have been preparing the International Space Station for Dragon's arrival. The teams in Mission Control Houston recently gave their go for launch, confirming that the station is ready to receive Dragon and the new crew. Following liftoff, today's flight to the space station will take about 28 hours, with Dragon flying autonomously the entire way. Docking is targeted for 11:30 p.m. Eastern, 8:30 p.m. Pacific, tomorrow, March 15th. And just like autopilot on a commercial aircraft, the crew always has the ability to take manual control of the spacecraft if needed.
And before all of that happens, as the booster returns to the launch site,
through the crew access arm is one option up until the point in which the launch escape system is armed, and then it's off the top of the rocket.
Yeah, that's right. That launch escape arm could actually swing back in just about 30 seconds, and during that time, the crew would actually be unbuckling their seatbelts and getting ready to egress, so that timing would work out.
I just closed, arming the launch escape system.
Copy, Dragon. You are go for 6.6 arm launch escape.
visit nasa.gov/Artemis-Roman numeral 2 or II. You don't have to worry about getting updates there, though, because, Jessica, you are friends and former classmates with both Victor Glover and Christina Cook.
Yeah, that's right. They are my astronaut classmates, like brothers and sisters, and it has been so exciting to see this Artemis journey. I was here for the Artemis 1 launch, and that just made it all so real. We saw the hardware, we saw the vehicle, we saw the launch, and we knew that the next time that vehicle
And from all of us, good luck, Godspeed, go CREW-10, and enjoy the ride.
Great comms. That was from our core here in Hawthorne in Mission Control. Now, there are many systems in place to ensure that the rocket and the crew are both safe leading up to liftoff and during flight. And now that we are in terminal count, our teams are performing those final checks before launch.
And coming up here in just a few minutes, we will start having that stage 1 engine chill start. And now we're just over 8 minutes away from launch. Again, today's ride to orbit will be about 9 minutes, which is from the time of liftoff to second stage cutoff. And then Dragon in the second stage will continue to coast for a few minutes after that prior to separation. You'll hear some performance calls along the way as we get into the final countdown and then after liftoff. And these are SpaceX flight controllers reporting on trajectory, speed, booster performance, and other key milestones. So some of the callouts you will hear after liftoff are a combination of letters and numbers, which will mark different abort zones throughout the flight up the eastern seaboard. The first two are 1 Alpha and 1 Bravo, which are abort modes available while the first stage is firing. And then the next round of numbers and letters you'll hear are 2 Alpha through 2 Echo, though you'll only hear the 2 Alpha call on the public loops, and those will come into play once the second stage kicks in. And then diverting a little bit from the other naming system, you will hear the call out Shannon, which refers to Shannon, Ireland. And this call means the crew could target off the coast of Ireland if they needed to abort late in the second stage burn. And you'll continue to hear those different call outs along with key performance call outs from the guidance, navigation, and control officer along with the propulsion lead. We're now just under 7 minutes away from launch.
Engines are chilling in for flight.
And we just heard that confirmation that the stage 1 engine chill has started.
Yeah, exactly. That call out is because we are flowing a little bit of liquid oxygen into the engines. That's to help prepare the vehicle or the engines for the full flow of liquid oxygen into the engines. That makes sure that we don't shock the system at that full flow. Now we are still loading. At liftoff, Falcon 9 is consuming about 700 gallons of fuel per second. So engine chill helps us prevent that thermal shock into the engines. So again, we have passed that T-minus 7 minute mark. Next call out will be stage 1, RP1 loading complete, which we just heard that.
And the RP1 is densified kerosene or rocket fuel that will propel the crew into orbit. All of that RP1 is now fully loaded into the rocket, and since we previously heard that second stage loading was completed. We are still loading the liquid oxygen or LOX onto the first and second stages, and this is the oxidizer needed to combine with the densified kerosene that just finished loading. The RP1 liquid propellant needs an oxidizer to combine with in order to ignite. Coming up in just under 30 seconds at that T-minus 5 minute mark, we will hear the call for Dragon to configure for terminal count and then transition over to internal power.
Tanks are pressing for strong mic retrack.
Dragon is in, configure for terminal count.
And there we just heard that call out for terminal count. So now Dragon onboard computers will take control of the spacecraft. We also heard that the propellant tanks on Falcon 9 are getting ready to pressurize, adding some additional structural support to the rocket as we get ready for that strong back to retract. And that strong back provides access to Falcon 9's fueling lines.
Has started.
That strong back lower has now started, and again, that strong back provides access to Falcon 9's fueling lines and umbilicals for both propellant load and the different gases being loaded on board.
And what you should see on your screen is there's those clamp arms that are around the second stage just below Dragon. They're going to open up, and once they're fully open, then that strong back, or the TE, can begin to recline away from the vehicle. Now, initially, we are going to recline that TE just about 2 degrees away from the vehicle, and then we will fully move the TE about 45 degrees away up at T0. And they're maybe a little hard to see on your screen, but the clamp arms are opening up there. There's a better view. Looks like the clamp arms are now fully open, so that TE will begin to move away from the vehicle. Very slow and slight, but just enough to get two degrees away from the vehicle.
And then coming up in less than 30 seconds at the T-3 minute mark, the first stage liquid oxygen or LOX load will complete. And we'll continue to check through a couple more fueling milestones, including one around the T-2 minute mark before flight, where we'll hear liquid oxygen loading is complete on the second stage. And now you see all of those white clouds on your screen. Those are clouds of vapor, and they're completely normal, and we'll see them continue to build up as we get closer to launch. This is because liquid oxygen is super chilled, so a little of it will boil off in the warmer Florida air.
Stage 1, LOX load complete.
Great call out there. Stage 1.
Count and on.
Putting liquid oxygen onto stage 2, and that'll wrap up here at the T-2 minute mark, just about 20 seconds from now. And once we finish propellant loading, that will mean that 1 million pounds of RP1 and liquid oxygen will be loaded onto Falcon 9 here, just under 10 seconds.
Stage 2, LOX load complete.
We just heard confirmation that the stage 2 liquid oxygen loading is now complete. We are under 2 minutes away from launch. Gas closeout has also begun. So we're now isolating all of the feed lines for the different gas systems from the Falcon 9 rocket. And those gases will then get vented overboard through umbilicals and the strong back. And you just heard that call out that Dragon is an auto
gas closeouts, expect loud venting.
Well, you can hear that venting now. Obviously, rockets are very loud, and the sound can impart pressure loads back on the rocket itself. The ton of water absorbs and prevents the sound from hitting the structure and reverberating back onto the rocket. And that call out for auto idle puts the rocket in a state the flight computers understand before it takes over, making sure the transition to final countdown is smooth and all the flight computers on board are in sync and configured for launch.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And now we just heard that Falcon 9 is in startup.
Is in countdown.
And in the final countdown, less than a minute to go, and at the time of launch, the space station will be flying 260 statute miles over the west coast of Australia.
Dragon, SpaceX. Go for launch.
And great call out.
SpaceX, Dragon CREW-10, copy, go for launch.
Great call out that we're go for launch, and we do have a large crowd here in front of Mission Control.
T-minus 30 seconds.
Waiting to watch CREW-10 take off today.
T-minus 15. T-minus 10. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Go SpaceX, go NASA CREW-10.
Copy, 1 Alpha.
And liftoff of CREW-10 now Vehicles pitching down range. Space Station. 1.7 million pounds of thrust now propelling Falcon 9 and CREW-10. And we're continuing to get good call-outs on the first stage performance so far. We're now 40 seconds into today's flight.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Continuing to get good performance call-outs.
Throttle down.
Yeah, we are throttling down the engines in preparation for Max Q. What great timing that was. We just passed through Max Q. That's the largest structural load that the vehicle will see on ascent.
Vehicle supersonic. Stage 1, throttle up.
We're now just over 1 minute and 10 seconds into today's flight, traveling at more than 1,400 miles per hour.
Stage 1 Bravo.
And we just heard that call out for 1 Bravo, which means we're in the second and final abort mode for the first stage, continuing to get good performance. And the crew already pulling over 2 Gs. Next up, we'll have a couple of events happening in rapid succession.
Impact chill started.
First will be that engine chill on the second stage impact engine, which we just heard. And then we'll have MECO, or main engine cutoff, where the 9 engines on the first stage will cut off ahead of the first and second stages. Will be separating from one another. Then the single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite and continue to carry CREW-10 to orbit while the first stage begins its journey back to Earth. Now we're just 2 minutes into today's flight. The vehicle is traveling just under 4,000 miles per hour.
We're just about 20 seconds away from those events that Anna just mentioned. The 9 Merlin engines will shut down here in just about 10 seconds for MECO, stage separation, and SES-1.
Main engine cutoff.
SpaceX Dragon, 2 Alpha.
Stage separation confirmed.
Copy, 2 Alpha.
Great call-outs and incredible views there on your left-hand screen. On your left-hand screen, you can see a view from stage 1. And an extremely excited crowd here in Hawthorne. Awesome views of that boost back burn on the first stage, as well as the MVAC engine igniting on the second stage. Great views there. Now the booster is in its boost back burn. This is the first of 3 burns as it makes its way back down to Earth. This will last about 45 seconds. And the CREW-10 crew is still on board Dragon, attached to Falcon 9's second stage, which you can see there on your right-hand screen.
And we're now at 3 minutes and 20 seconds into today's flight. The vehicle is traveling about 6,500 miles per hour. They are on their way to the space station. And we did have that confirmation coming up of the boost back shutdown, and then coming up at the T+6 minute mark. And there we have our first images of the crew inside the Dragon spacecraft as they make their way into orbit. And the crew
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Continuing to get good call-outs.
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
The stage 2 continues to be on power with in its firing until we get to that second stage engine cutoff around the 9-minute mark of flight. It's about 5 minutes of flight to go before Dragon will be flying free.
Some cool views there on your left-hand screen. That's the first stage booster as it's making its way back down to Earth. This is a ground tracking camera getting these awesome views.
And on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see that lone Merlin vacuum engine of the second stage. We're continuing to get good performance on the second stage. And the crew's G-loads will dip right when we hit the separation events, and it's going to continue to build up until then.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
We're now at 5 minutes into today's flight. with a liftoff at 7:03 p.m. Pacific, 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific. Continuing to get good call-outs as Stage 1 makes its way back to Earth, and Stage 2 continues to fire, propelling Dragon into orbit.
If you're just now joining us, the 4 members of Crew-10 launched from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and they're currently on board Dragon, still attached to Falcon 9's second stage, which you're seeing there on your right-hand screen. On your left-hand screen, the first stage vehicle is making its way back down to Earth. It already completed the first of 3 burns as the boost back burn, and the next event coming up for that vehicle is going to be the entry burn.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Great call-outs there. That entry burn is coming up.
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
That entry burn is coming up here in just under 20 seconds. We'll reignite 3 of those 9 Merlin 1D engines to help slow the vehicle down as it makes its way back into the Earth's atmosphere.
We're now just over 6 minutes into today's flight as Dragon and the second stage continue traveling at over 12,000 miles per hour, making their way into orbit and on the way to the International Space Station.
There, we just saw on the screen, it was very quick, but we had the entry burn, which we got some cool views of that from the ground, which is awesome. Now the next event coming up will be the landing burn for the first stage. That's coming up here in about 30 seconds.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Again, great call-outs for
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
Confirmation there from the crew as they continue to make their way into orbit. Now 7 minutes into today's flight, the first stage making its way back down to Earth and the second stage continuing to fire.
This is an awesome view. Let's see if we can see the center engine relight for that landing burn here in a few seconds. There's that landing burn. Let's watch as Falcon 9 touches down on landing zone 1. And the crowd here is excited to see Falcon 9 touch down on landing zone 1.
And now that the first stage has made its way back to Earth, we're about a minute away from the second engine cutoff, which we're expecting around the 9-minute mark of today's flight. We're continuing to get good call-outs, and Dragon and all of the systems on the vehicle are performing as expected. Just over 8 minutes into today's flight, traveling more than 21,000 miles per hour.
Terminal guidance.
Hearing good call-outs. We're about 30 seconds away from that second engine cutoff, and then shortly after that, about a minute or so later, we will have orbital insertion.
SpaceX Dragon, Shannon.
SpaceX copy, Shannon.
And that call out there for Shannon, and that is the call out for Shannon, Ireland, which is the final abort stage for the second stage off the coast of Ireland. Standing by for a second engine cutoff.
And back shutdown.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal orbit insertion.
And there we heard confirmation.
Launch escape system disarmed.
Good confirmation of orbital insertion. Crew-10 is now well on their way to the International Space Station following a 9.5-minute flight uphill.
Now, the second stage is preparing for Dragon separation here, which should happen shortly, in about 10-15 seconds is what we're expecting. And we're preparing for stabilizing the second stage so that we can have a smooth separation.
And there you can see on the left-hand side of your screen There on your screen, you can see that Dragon separation, that second stage making its way, and Dragon is now flying free. 10 minutes into today's flight, that was about a minute after we had that second engine cutoff and orbital insertion. And it looks like a good separation, good rates. Dragon now flying free. There on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see some first images of Crew-10 inside the Dragon Endurance spacecraft as they're now successfully in orbit.
Dragon, SpaceX, Chief Engineer on Countdown 1. On behalf of the entire Falcon team, we thank you for flying with Falcon and wish you a great mission. Over to LD.
It was an honor flying with you this evening. We wish you well on your journey and give Crew 9 our best. Thank you for flying SpaceX.
SpaceX Dragon, this is Crew-10 Commander Ann McLean. Thank you to all of the teams from across the world who contributed to the launch today. Spaceflight is tough, but humans are tougher. Days like today are made possible only when people choose to do the harder right over the easier wrong. Build relationships, choose cooperation, and believe in the inherent goodness of all people across the world. To my family and friends, without you, I would not be here. Explore boldly, live gracefully, go Crew-10. And over to pilot Nicole Ayers.
Nicole Ayers again. We're not the first humans to get to orbit, and we wouldn't be here without the bravery and hard work of those who have paved the way for human spaceflight. We now get the unique perspective of Earth without borders and get to revel in the connectedness of humanity. I would be remiss to not once again acknowledge those who helped me get here to this wonderful view and this perspective, to the teachers, coaches, fellow officers, fellow teammates, Raptor Nation, to my friends and family that encouraged my dreams from the start. Thank you. I wouldn't be here without you.
This is Mission Specialist Takuya Onishi. I want to say a huge thank you to NASA and SpaceX, especially the Falcon 9 team for the successful launch, and we are looking forward to a smooth ride to the International Space Station. 日本の皆さん、たくさんの応援ありがとうございます。9年ぶりの無重力の感覚をかみしめてます。これから先の ISS への宇宙の旅、楽しんでいきたいと思います。I will now hand the mic over to Mission Specialist Kirill.
Thanks a lot to NASA and SpaceX for this wonderful ride, and I want to say a couple of words in Russian. Пользуясь такой чудесной возможностью, хочу поздравить с 65-летием со дня начала подготовки первого отряда. И также хочу сказать спасибо большое за те знания и жизненный опыт, который мной были получены в всех стенах для того, чтобы выполнить этот полет. А также спасибо школе номер 14 города Назарова, Ульяновскому высшему авиационному училищу гражданской авиации и авиакомпании МКАР и Нордвин, где я начинал свой путь в небо. И, конечно же, спасибо большое семье и за поддержку.
Thank you, Crew 10. At this time, I can report nominal dehumidifier activation and service section Draco checkouts.
SpaceX Dragon, copies.
And such great words from CREW-10 as well as the Corps here in Hawthorne and Mission Control. We also got confirmation that the nose cone deploy is underway. The 6 hooks that hold the nose cone in place during the launch and ascent portions have to retract, and then the nose cone will be able to start to swing open and deploy. Now, this uncovers a number of critical systems for the flight up to the space station, including the forward bulkhead thrusters and the docking hatch. Just pausing in case there were going to be any comms. And we did have good confirmation, good checkouts of the 12 Draco thrusters around the service section. Now, 4 to go after we get the nose cone open, and then the ECLIS, the environmental control and life support system, activated inside of Dragon. Now, soon the crew will be able to get their visors open and get out of their suits and settle in for the ride to the space station.
And now we're just waiting for confirmation that the nose cone has fully deployed with all of the hooks open. But just to recap a little bit, we did have a successful liftoff of CREW-10 about 18 minutes ago at 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific. And following an approximately 9-minute ride after liftoff, we had that orbital insertion, and Dragon and CREW-10 were flying free and well on their way to the International Space Station. They now have an approximately 28-hour journey before they do reach their destination of the space station, and that docking is targeted for tomorrow, March 15th at 8:30 p.m. Pacific, 11:30 p.m. Eastern, to the forward-facing port of the station's Harmony module. Between now and then, Dragon will perform a series of burns as it catches up to the space station, and that first burn will be a phase burn about 30 minutes from now at 4:52 p.m. Pacific, 7:52 p.m. Eastern.
And the nose cone is about 75% open at this point. Human spaceflight has come so far in the last 5 years with Dragon. In addition to flying people, SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft also enables researchers the opportunity to fly critical science to orbit. And so far, SpaceX and Dragon have carried over 1,000 research experiments to and from low Earth orbit, both to the International Space Station and on our free flyer missions. From DNA sequencing to 3D printing studies enabled by Dragon, and the space station tests Dragon and the space station test a variety of technologies, systems, and materials that will be needed for future long-duration exploration missions. Now, every mission yields critical science and research and learnings that help make life both on Earth and in space better. And flights like today's help us continue to lay this foundation for our future among the stars and continue our mission to make life multiplanetary.
Once CREW-10 does arrive to the International Space Station, they will, of course, partake in some additional science and research. They will have over 200 experiments that they will contribute to during their time aboard the International Space Station. Again, we're just standing by for confirmation that that nose cone has fully deployed. And we may also get some additional look inside the cabin of the crew.
Yeah, as we patiently wait for those views, we are trying to see if we can get some views. We were seeing some views from the second stage. This looks like it might be a view from the forward.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal nose cone opening and forward bulkhead Draco checkouts.
SpaceX Dragon copies and confirm nominal EQUIPAGGIO activation and go for visors.
And there we heard confirmation that the nose cone has fully deployed and that the crew is now able to lift their visors. And there, again, we're seeing some views inside the Dragon Endurance spacecraft with CREW-10 on their way to the International Space Station.
Affirm, you are go to open visors.
Copy.
Great calls there. They're go to open visors, which means that shortly they'll also be able to get out of their suits and get comfortable for the entire ride on Dragon to the International Space Station.
And from left to right on your screen, there's Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers, NASA astronaut Ian McLean, and then far on the right-hand side of your screen is JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi.
And there you could see that they are in microgravity as their tablets are floating around there. They do have them attached to a little string that helps allow them so that, you know, as they're strapped into their seats, they don't lose their tablets.
We're now just over 20 minutes into today's flight following that successful liftoff at 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific. There you're getting an over-the-shoulder view between the commander and pilot, so Anne McLean and Nicole Ayers.
If you're just now joining us, you are watching live CREW-10 out in space in the Dragon vehicle. They lifted off from Space Launch Complex 39A at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Time.
Dragon SpaceX, there are about 3 minutes remaining in the current ground station pass. At this time, you're welcome to introduce your zero-G indicator. We're using the full crew cam so we can see all 4 crew members right now.
All right, copies. Thank you, SpaceX. We'd like to introduce the CREW-10 G indicator. Taki is holding him up. This is a hand crochet origami crane. It's a Japanese origami, hand crocheted in the United States, and his name is Drug, which is the Russian name for friend. Origami is the Japanese art of folding paper. This is a nod to the unique and deep cultural traditions from which each of us come. While we're from different parts of the world, we are brought together in this bold endeavor, and we represent all of humanity. The folded paper design was also chosen to represent paper airplanes that we made when we were kids, before we were astronauts, when all we had was a dream. And we looked up at the sky and we wondered, what if? It's a symbol that every big accomplishment starts with a quiet dream, and that dreams do come true when you believe in yourself and you listen only to those who believe in you. CREW-10 believes in all of the dreamers. The flag and the number markings on the crane, there's a number 10 on each of its wings and a flag from each one of our countries on the tail. This is a nod to each of our shared experiences as professional pilots. These patches are arranged to look like an airplane. This is a source of deep pride for our crew, because what pilot doesn't like to talk about the fact that they're a pilot? But this also symbolizes our shared culture as astronauts. In the years of training together, we found we have far more in common than we do different. Our zero-G indicator was handmade by a small business owner in the United States. This represents all the hands which created our entire space program, and this rocket and this capsule that we're flying today. It also represents all of the artists and musicians who inspire people to imagine beyond what they can see. Spaceflight is perhaps the most complex endeavor of our time, but it was built one step at a time, by one person at a time. Finally, the origami crane is the international symbol for peace, hope, and healing. CREW-10 hopes to serve as a beacon of hope, a reminder of what humans can accomplish when we see the goodness in one another and we choose to work together toward a common goal. Today, we are united not through common enemy, but through shared optimism and a basic belief in the goodness of humanity. It is far easier to be enemies than it is to be friends. It's easier to break partnerships and relationships than it is to build them. Spaceflight is hard, and success depends on leaders of character who choose the harder right over the easier wrong, and who build programs, partnerships, and relationships. We explore for the benefit of all. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, then go together. CREW-10 chooses to go together in peace, because you cannot be great without the greatness of others. Go NASA, go Roscosmos, go JAXA, and go CREW-10.
Dragon SpaceX, we really appreciate those words, Anne. Thanks for introducing.
From NASA astronaut and the CREW-10 commander, Anne McClain. And again, CREW-10 comprised of McClain along with NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers and JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi along with Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov are now safely in orbit following an approximately 9-minute ride after a liftoff at 4:03 p.m. Pacific, 7:03 p.m. Eastern from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The crew now has an approximately 28-hour journey ahead of them before they reach their destination, the International Space Station. Again, docking is targeted for tomorrow, March 15th at 8:30 p.m. Pacific, 11:30 p.m. Eastern to the forward-facing port of the station's Harmony module. Between now and then, Dragon will perform a series of burns to catch up with the space station, and that first burn will be taking place around 4:52 p.m. Pacific, 7:52 p.m. Eastern today.
And those were some great words about the zero-G indicator. Very incredible. Human spaceflight has come so far in the last 5 years with Dragon. In addition to flying people, SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft also enables researchers the opportunity to fly critical science to orbit. Now, so far, SpaceX and Dragon have carried over 1,000 research experiments to and from low Earth orbit, both to the International Space Station and on our free flyer missions. From DNA sequencing to 3D printing, studies enabled by Dragon and the space station test a variety of technologies, systems, and materials that will be needed for future long-duration exploration missions. Every mission yields critical research and learnings that help make life both on Earth and in space better. And flights like today's help us continue to lay the foundation for our future among the stars and continue our mission to make life multiplanetary. Now, we'll be signing off from SpaceX for now, so we're going to send it back to NASA. But before we go, we want to thank NASA for entrusting us with today's mission, and thank you all for being here with us today.
And with that, we're going to end our coverage from Hawthorne until we pick back up with our docking coverage in about 26 hours at 6:45 p.m. Pacific, 9:45 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, March 15th, for that targeted docking to the International Space Station at 8:30 p.m. Pacific, 11:30 p.m. Eastern. So for now, thank you for joining us, and back over to you, Jessica and Daryl at the Kennedy Space Center to wrap up today's coverage.
And welcome back to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where we just watched CREW-10 lift off from Launch Pad 39A. The crew is now en route to the International Space Station. I'm Daryl Nail. This is NASA astronaut Jessica Meir, who just watched one of her close friends and many friends, CREW-10, go up into space. And I'm wondering what that moment was like for you.
Well, I will tell you, it is a moment that you never forget. I am so excited right now sitting here thinking especially of Nicole and Kirill, because that first time experiencing prolonged weightlessness is something that they will never forget, and they will be talking about it for years and years for the rest of their lives, just like I recounted my stories here tonight. Those words were all so inspirational as well. I love how they unveiled their droog, their origami crane. It really hit on so many important themes tonight, talking about this Japanese art of folding paper, really combining all of the cultures of their crew, the name being a Russian name meaning friend, the origami crane for Japanese culture, all of the flags on the crane handmade by a small business in the U.S.